Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to Quick Tech Tips and Reviews. My name is Tony, and in this channel we bring you a variety of tech-related content. If this is your first time here, be sure to subscribe and hit that little bell down below so that you're alerted to when new content is being released. In this video, I'm going to work with an existing home network and replace an Edge Router X with a USG. Alright guys, so in a previous networking series I did on building a home network, this is what we ended up with. At the head end, we had the Edge router connecting to the UniFi Switch 60. The cloud key was our UniFi controller, and then we had the UAP-AC light as our access point. So what I want to do today, since I just picked up this guy right here, I want to replace the existing Edge router X in this diagram with this new USG. So the end result should look a little something like this. You can see that it's almost exactly the same thing. It is exactly the same thing. We're just swapping out the Edge router X for the USG. So let's get started and see what's involved. All right, guys, so I'm logged into my UniFi controller on my cloud key. I'm here at the dashboard, and you see I have my two green bubbles. One is my LAN, which is my US 60 watt switch, and the other is my WLAN, which is my UAP-AC light. So one of the first things we have to do when adopting a USG into an existing network is make sure the network settings are correct. Now, once we have the USG adopted, we'll also have these other bubbles lit up as well. So remember, the Edge router is doing the DHCP services right now for the main LAN and for the VLAN. So we just have to make sure and go into the settings on the UniFi controller and make sure the networks are set up properly. So let's do that now by coming down to the settings icon and up to the networks tab. Here are the two networks that were created in that home networking series. And if you're interested in seeing that series with the Edge router X at the head end, I'll put the link to that series up above. So let's start with the LAN, and it's on the 192.168.100.1/24 subnet, and that I want to keep the same. Really, all we have to do here is enable the DHCP server. I'll change the range so it starts serving addresses at 100, but you can leave it at the default or make it, whatever you want. That's fine. I'm going to manually enter the DNS server, so we'll make the primary the router 100.1, and the secondary we'll just make a Google server, one of the public servers, and we'll say save. Let's just go back in and make sure the changes were saved. Okay, DHCP service is on, the range is starting at 100, and the DNS servers are in. Excellent. Okay, now here's the VLAN guest Wi-Fi that we created in that last video series, and it's a VLAN only. So if I go in to edit it, I don't have the option of setting up DHCP services because it's a VLAN only. And remember, the Edge router is serving up the DHCP services. So what we need to do here is delete this VLAN only network and add a new network. And we're going to keep it a LAN, and we'll call it guest Wi-Fi. And we're going to put it on VLAN 20. And the gateway subnet is going to be 192.168.20.1/24 because that's the subnet of the VLAN that we created in the previous videos. The DHCP server will make the range 192.168.20. We'll give it the whole range. Just copy that. 254. Again, we'll add the router as the primary DNS server, and we'll add the public Google as the secondary. Okay, that should be everything. Let's say save. And again, let's just go back in and check. So we have VLAN 20, we got the 20.1 subnet. The range is 20.2 all the way up to 20.254, and there are our DNS servers. Okay, excellent. So now that we have the UniFi controller configured, the devices are provisioning, and I've seen this happen before. For some reason with my cloud key, it takes some time for the UAP AC light to come back online, but it definitely will. So the next thing we have to do, and the next challenge, again, because we're adding this USG into an existing network that has a 192.168.100 subnet, we have to change the default IP of the unified controller, not the unified controller, of the USG, so that we can get it adopted onto this existing network. So let's take a look at that and get started. Okay, so as you can see, the UAP AC light is back online, and while I was waiting for it to return, I plugged in the USG. I plugged my computer directly into the USG's LAN port, and I changed my computer to dhcp so that it obtained an address from the USG. So you can see here, the Ethernet port has a 192.168.1.6 address, and that's coming from the USG. So that's good. In the meantime, I also found this article on the community forum, how to adopt a USG into an existing network, and that's perfect. That's exactly what I need to do, and it was released on December 1st of this year. So what I need here is change the USG LAN IP before adoption. So here are the instructions. And according to what it says here, it says on USG versions 4.3.60 and newer, you can browse to the default address, configure the LAN IP and DHCP server parameters from there rather than using the command line. Well, unfortunately, I guess I don't have the firmware or newer to do this, because I went there and I did not see the options to configure the LAN IP. So I'm going to resort to using the command line, and I'm going to use this document as a guide. And by the way, I'll put the link to this document down in the video description below. So first thing I want to do is bring up my terminal app, because I'm on a Mac, and I want to see if I can ping the router. So 192.168.1.1, and you can see I'm getting a successful ping from the USG. Okay, so now let's move this up here so that we can see the instructions. And it says here, for this example, the controller is on 10.0.0.50/24. So let's change the USG's IP to 10.0.0.1. So in this case, in my case, my unified controller's address is 192.168.100.3. So we want to change and put the USG on 192.168.100.1. So let's SSH into the USG. So it'll be, the default username is UBNT at 192.168.1.1. And it's asking me for the password, and the default password is also UBNT. And these are just, this is just for video purposes and tutorial demonstration. So make sure you don't use UBNT in production. I know you've probably heard that 1,000 times from other YouTube content creators, but it's a really good point. Make sure you change it in production. So, okay, so let's type configure. Okay, so now we're in the edit mode. So we're going to say set interfaces. Actually, before we change it, let's do a show interface to confirm the existing IP address. So show interfaces. And there you go. There's ETH2, 192.168.2.1, and there's ETH1, 192.168.1.1. Okay, so now what we want to do is say set interfaces Ethernet. I guess I could just copy it. ETH1 address, and now we're going to enter the address that we want it to be. So 192.168.1.1. 100.1/24. Oops, let me get that out of there and make sure I put the right period in. Okay, now we're going to delete. Actually, let me copy that. Okay, and now we're going to commit. And we should lose connection to the USG because we've changed the address. So while it's setting itself, let's move on to the next step. So after the settings committed in the USG, I wasn't able to get a DHCP address from it. So I set my computer with a manual address on the new subnet that we changed the USG to. So with the 100.2 address, I am able to now get to the admin interface. So if I type in 192.168.100.1, you'll see it brings me to the Unify Gateway's default page. And here's where we can configure the WAN, but I'm not worried about configuring the WAN right now. Basically what this is telling me that if I can reach it at 192.168.100.1, then I am ready to adopt it into the Unify controller. So what I have to do now is unplug my computer from the LAN port of the USG, plug it in back into the switch on my home network, plug the USG's LAN port into that same switch, and then we should be able to have it appear in the Unify controller and get it adopted. So we're gonna give that a shot now. I'll be right back once I just change the wires around and get everything set up the way it needs to be. So now that I'm back in my Unify controller, my computer's back on the correct network. The USG's LAN port is plugged into the existing home network into one of the ports on the US 60-watt switch. So if we come over here to the devices tab, and there you go, we can see that the Unify Security Gateway is pending adoption. And here you can see the firmware version is 4.3.33.49, blah, 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 blah. And in order to have changed the default IP address of the USG from the GUI or web interface, we would have had to been at a minimum of 4.3.60. So what I'm going to do now is go ahead and come over here and hit adopt. And now it says it's adopting. Ooh, and it says adoption failed. So we're going to figure out why. All right, so I figured out what went wrong that caused the USG adoption to fail. And some of you, if you were following along, probably figured it out and was probably trying to yell at me saying, you forgot to unhook the Edge Router X. And yes, that was totally my oversight, because the Edge Router X had the 192.168.100.1 address as well. So there was an IP conflict causing the USG adoption to fail. So basically what I had to do off camera was factory default the USG back to factory settings, go through the whole process that I showed you before of changing the default IP using the command line. Now when I have everything back to normal, I restarted the USG. It's plugged in directly to my home network. And as I don't know if you saw while I've been talking, but it's been provisioning, and now it's actually successfully connected. So it's been added to the network. So again, that was my oversight. I guess when you get involved in doing these videos and you're thinking about what it is you're going to say, sometimes you overlook the obvious, and that was definitely my bag. So let me go ahead and give this a name, a user-friendly name, by clicking on it and coming over to the config tab. And in the alias field here, we're going to call it lab USG and say save. Okay, and now we have an upgrade here. So before we upgrade, I have to now, the final step is take the WAN port and plug it in so it gets internet access. So I will be right back. Let me do that now. So I think I'm going to forego running the firmware upgrade on the USG for now. I could always do that offline. What's more important is to check, now that we have the USG at the head end of this lab network, is to see if we have internet access or not. So let me bring up a ping tool and let's ping the Google public server. And there we go. So you can see we're getting a response from Google's DNS server. All right, so next, now that we know we have internet access, let's run a couple of speed tests. So let's come on up to the dashboard. And now you can see in the unified controller, as to before I had these two bubbles only lit. Now that the USG is in the mix, now I have the third bubble lit, and the latency and throughput dials are also active as well. So let's do a speed test right from the unified controller. And there we go. So we're getting pretty decent download speeds. I have 150 meg line coming into the house, so I'm paying for 150 meg down and 25 up. So we're getting pretty close to what it is we're paying for. And I'm pretty happy about that, because the lab network is being fed off the main network. So the WAN port of the USG is getting its internet connection from a switch off of my main network. So we're doing really well here with the speeds, considering. This should be almost done. That's good enough. So 140 down and 24 up. Okay. All right, so that about wraps it up for today, guys. I apologize again for that oversight. Being able to troubleshoot the issues that arise, though, is part of the game. If you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up. Be sure to subscribe to some of my other UniFi videos. Please remember to subscribe, like, and share. My name is Tony with QuickTech Solutions. Thank you for watching. See you next time.